everybody, and welcome again to my channel. First thing you want to check out is that last episode that I did about buttons. It's been some episodes ago, but I'm going to put a link to that. We talked about one-piece buttons, two-piece buttons, three-piece buttons, pewter buttons, tombac buttons, just a whole bunch of things, sportsman's buttons, fraternal organization buttons. So you're going to want to check that out. I want to add to those two-piece buttons the watch case buttons. Now take a look at this. You want to see how that's got like a beveled edge around the outside. Watch case buttons look almost like a pocket watch case with the glass dial in the center and the case around the outside. They generally have a beveled edge. They don't have a high survival rate in the fields. This one I think is sort of a watch case button. It's got a beveled edge, but it's kind of destroyed on one side there. But they're two-piece buttons. They often have that kind of beveling to them. That's not the best example, but I've got a couple of non-dug examples here that I'll show as well. And collectors call these watch case buttons. And they can come in various styles, and there's even sporting buttons and other types of buttons that are watch case style. So that's kind of interesting. The other thing that I wanted to add about the discussion of one-piece buttons is the fact that one-piece buttons do make a comeback. Here's a beautiful silver gilded example. They kind of die off in popularity around the Civil War years, and then they never really completely die because see how the design is completely punched through there? That is a hallmark of a late Victorian button. So those are late 1800s. Story buttons, picture buttons. So a lot of these larger, really ornate ones that are one piece, come back into vogue around that time. The next button I'd like to talk about is the hard rubber button. These were made with the Goodyear's patent of vulcanization of rubber. The patent year was 1851, so you'll see 1851 stamped on these buttons, but it doesn't mean that they were actually made in 1851. And if I recall correctly, they were the patent holder, and other companies manufactured the hard rubber buttons as a general rule. Novelty Rubber Company and some others were big manufacturers of these buttons mid-century, mid-1800s. And so you can see these hard rubber buttons, a variety of different styles. There's an excellent book about hard rubber buttons. Now there's a category of buttons that could just be best described as utility buttons, and those are buttons that are made for underwear, made for work clothes, made for very dressed down sorts of garments. And they made these in all kinds of different styles. Here's one that was actually turned on a lathe-like device for the holes after it was cut out of an abalone shell. And sometimes you can find the blanks from these where they were cut, or the shells that they were cut from that have the characteristic circular coin-shaped, disc-shaped divots removed to turn them into buttons. Another type of material that was often made for either clothier buttons or utility buttons. Vegetable ivory. It's actually made out of a palm tree nut, and I think the heyday for these was right around the turn of the century, maybe early 20th century, late 1800s, early 1900s. And these are carved out of palm tree nut, and so they're all stamped with makers' names. There's a big center of these manufacturing of these in New York. These might be a find that you would make as a sifted find, so kind of interesting material there, and kind of a short-lived material in terms of button manufacturing. Another type of utility button is the Procer button, and these are a pressed ceramic button. They are made out of usually a fine powder that is then pressed in a mold, very high, hundreds of pounds per square inch. And you can find different types of these. This one has a pie crust design around the outside. Most of these are plain. They come in many different sizes, from larger ones to very tiny ones, 2 holes, 3 holes, or 4 holes. So many different styles. The Procer manufacturing process is what they're named for, Procser, named for the inventor of that pressing of the ceramic at very high pressures to make these buttons. The 3-hole ones, it seems like most of the ones I have, the 3-hole ones are very small buttons. These want everything from doll clothes to shirts to underwear. The very large ones of these were used actually on trousers as suspender buttons. In terms of metal buttons, metal utility buttons, often what we see in the 1800s are trouser buttons of various styles. This is one style of trouser button. I just have these all grouped together here. These are 4-hole trouser buttons. And why I call them trouser buttons instead of just plain utility buttons is that these buttons were often on the flies and also on the waistbands. The larger ones generally tend to be the waistband buttons from trousers that held suspenders. Then the smaller buttons tend to be on fly buttons from trousers. But that's one style that has, the 4 central holes, a shallow kind of dish-shaped or saucer-shaped interior, and then some sort of a pattern around the outside. This second type of trouser button, utility button, is a type that has one central bar on the back side. This is a second variety of these. Regardless of what they say on the front, they have that one central bar that runs through the button for attachment. And notice that they come in similar sizes, a smaller size and a larger size. And then this third type of button has sort of a recessed back, and it has 4 different holes here. They're almost set in like triangular pattern here, almost like a birdcage shank, like French buttons. Okay, and so this is the third type of these. Now, I do see certain unusual patterns that are kind of in between the various types. One of the patterns that I see pretty prominently is a patent of a trouser button that just says Déposé, Paris. Notice that just has a front face and a back. It's a 2-piece button with just the 2 holes. Okay, and then another one that I tend to see is this type here that's Doherty's patent. And a little bit about Doherty's patent here. That's a pretty old patent from the 1800s. And I'm going to show the original patent here. The button here is a 2-piece button. And this patent was meant to decrease the amount of wear on the band of the trousers. So a lot of times you'll see with these little trouser buttons warranted not to cut. So in other words, the idea was that you use their button and it would not cut or fray the thread in its use. On the waistband, at the suspenders, or on the fly of pants. But this Doherty's patent, that's a fairly early patent, and this one says what? Henry Gruyter, New York, on this button. I haven't researched this specific button yet, but I have researched some of these other ones, whether they're from here or from overseas. Here's one from Germany, and this one says Saul Adam. This was founded, it says Berlin at the bottom. Notice that this is the style that has just the 4 holes, but it's a 2-piece button. And so S. Adam was founded in 1863 at Friedrich and Leipziger streets. His sons took over in 1900 but kept the same name, and they were Jewish, and they were actually expelled as a business in 1936 because of Hitler. So that's a fascinating button. Most of these clothier's buttons are really rare. In many cases, there's not too many examples surviving of these, but I think that part of it is because they don't really have a book that's dedicated to them yet. Most of these clothiers were in places like New York, Boston, and Louisiana, New Orleans, occasionally Baton Rouge, but they were in larger cities. Here's Duchess Poughkeepsie, and this was started in 1887, Duchess Manufacturing Company, but late 1800s, early 1900s. Now, there are some of these clothier buttons that date way back into the 1830s and 40s, as you saw with the Doherty's patent, which was a British patent, buttons. Those buttons can date pretty far back. So some of these buttons can date back as early as the 1830s and 40s, and most of them are the late 1800s, early 1900s. Here is an excavated Doherty's patent button on the left to kind of look at compared to the non-excavated Doherty's patent button on the right. Kind of interesting comparison to make. What we tend to see is a migration from this style of button with the 4 holes to a style of button that becomes an open face, what I call an open face tack button. These tack buttons on the left are excavated versions. I see what I call a sunburst style on the right. Notice that they have one opening and they were just tacked on to jeans or similar items. Here on the left, the tack still remains. Oops. And the tack is right there. You can see where it's still attached. So that item was thrown away, the jeans or whatever type of an item. These were again still on the waistbands of jeans, so they would attach suspenders to these. So you start to see this with denim and leather pants and things like that, calfskin, buckskin pants, and so forth. Okay, so over time, those open-face tack buttons kind of changed to closed-face tack buttons, or jeans buttons, or work clothes buttons, because they're kind of a mix. Basically, anything that had denim would have the tack right there, and notice that it's like the open-face tack button, except that there's a brass face over top of that. These two say sanforized, which was a process of pre-shrinking denim. This one says Ruffit, R-U-F-I-T. This one says N&W. This is Smith high grade, but there were hundreds and hundreds of these. They all have iron backs, whether or not they have the original tack remaining or not. Often it's broken off, but you can see that they're iron backed, brass faced, what I would categorize as denim buttons, just generally speaking, work clothes, overalls, blue jeans. And last of all, we get aluminum buttons. Here are excavated examples of aluminum buttons, Scott's Level Best, and some other buttons that have various marks. Aluminum, of course, can rot in the ground. Here are some non-excavated examples, bright and shiny like the day they were on clothes. And this one is unmarked. This one just has, oh goodness, what does that say? Stay Sewn, S-T-A-S-E-W-N, Stay Sewn. But these are both marked PB and Company, and with the patent date of 1924. And so you can see that marking right up here at the top, PB and Company, and the patent date, December 3rd, 1924. So it gives you a sense of when these types of aluminum buttons were patented. And I would say they were around probably 20s, 30s, and 40s. One more button that I'd like to talk about in this video. These are A.J. Tower & Company slicker buttons. They were for rain slickers that were made of like oiled leather. On the left is the zinc composition ones. They had a little wire shank made out of brass. Sometimes you just find the center portion of those, and sometimes you find just the outer disc without the wire shank. And on the right is one that was brass composition, which is a little more scarce than the zinc ones. These were made in the late 1800s and early 1900s. A.J. Tower Company was well known for their rain slickers, and another one that you may see is called Fish Brand. Fish Brand apparel, which was also for preventing rain, being inundated by rain. So I thought you all would enjoy that. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next week.